What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 161 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today I want to talk to you about Planetary, Volume 4 by Warren Ellis and John Cassaday. This concludes the main Planetary series from Wildstorm Comics, and this series, a little bit of backstory about how I first came to discover it and all that. I first learned about this series probably around 2004 or so, maybe 2005, and I voraciously devoured the first 3 trade paperbacks, and that was all that was available at that time. The series was not yet finished when I first heard about it. Now, it started in like 1999 or very, very early 2000, and by 2004 or 2005, it was not yet done. And bear in mind, this is only a 27-issue series, and it was not yet finished. It took them until like 2010 to announce that they were finally going to wrap up this series. I remember it was on April 1st. They announced that they were finally going to be finishing up the series, and I remember thinking that is the meanest April Fool's prank that you could ever pull on people who have been waiting for a very long time for this series to finish. And then the next day they were like, no, it's actually going to happen. And then they did finish it, and then they put out this volume, and then I bought it, and I was a little bit disappointed. Now, those of you who have watched my last few videos talking about this series, I didn't think that Volume 3 was as good as Volumes 1 and 2, but I think that Volume 4 is even more of a step down from Volume 3. First of all, we get our first 2-part story in this volume, and not a whole lot happens here. It definitely does not deserve to be a 2-part story. Basically, one of the 4, who is basically the Marvel Comics Fantastic Four characters, but they are bad guys in the world of Planetary, one of them gets sent to this faraway planet, and then Planetary, they strand him there, and we find out that there are these weird alien-looking angels that Planetary has kept prisoner for a very long time. Basically, nothing really happens in this 2-part story. It definitely does not need to be a 2-parter. Everything that happens there could have been in one issue. Then Elijah Snow goes to his therapist, who is basically female Doctor Strange, and she drugs him and tells him that he needs to look at the big picture. Again, nothing really happens there. Then we get an issue that shows how Elijah and Jaquita came to rescue Drums from the Planetary organization, and we get his origin story, and that's pretty cool, and it's tied in a little bit with the Planetary version of James Bond. And then we find out that there's more to the Planetary version of James Bond than meets the eye. So we do get some good stuff in this volume, but nothing really starts happening until about halfway through this book. And this is not a small book. The first half of this book is just extremely slow, and nothing really happens at all in the first half of this book. Now, the second half, things really start to kick into high gear. Basically, Elijah Snow takes the gloves off and says, it's finally time that we deal with what's left of the 4. And that's good. I just wish that they could have gotten to that point a little sooner. And when you read the final issue of this series, you have to wonder, why did it take them so long to get to the end of this series? Now, I don't know if it was John Cassaday's fault or Warren Ellis's fault, because I seem to recall hearing that the script was written for the final issue whenever they finally did announce that it was going to happen, but at the same time, John Cassaday is notorious for being very meticulous with his artwork. With Astonishing X-Men, it took him about twice as long to do 25 issues as it would take any other artist on the planet. So I'm not really sure whose fault it was that this series was delayed by like 9 years whenever they finally did finish doing it, but when you look at the very last issue, there's nothing really special here that you would think, okay, yeah, that was worth the 9 years of waiting, or however long that they ended up taking in between the last issue they did in the early 21st century and then 2009 or 2010 or whenever it was that they actually did it. But the defeat of the 4, it's pretty satisfying, but at the same time, these guys have been built up for like 24, 25 issues, and then when they finally are defeated, it's like, oh, okay, that's how you did it? You get to thinking like there's nothing that they could have done to have made it as satisfying as you would want it to be. It's satisfying enough, but you think maybe it could have been better. Basically, I think that this is a series that started off really fantastic with a really excellent premise, and then the more that they got into their own mythology, the more they got away from the premise of the series. For example, you look at the early volumes of this series, and there's a whole lot of loving homages to different things from pop culture and fiction, and then by the time you get to this volume, there's almost none of that. For example, female Doctor Strange is barely recognizable as Doctor Strange. By the end of this series, you don't have any references to anything from pop culture, like giant monster movies or Hong Kong action movies or anything like that. You had a lot of that stuff early on in the series. You don't really have any of it in this volume. I almost feel like part of the reason that this series took so long to finally finish up was that Warren Ellis just kind of got tired of it. And I think that's very likely because you look at the last issue of this series and it doesn't feel like much of a narrative. It feels, again, more like Warren Ellis is giving his own thoughts and feelings about different scientific principles. And that's fine if you want to read a scientific journal, but it's not fine if you want to read a series with a narrative. And I don't care about advanced scientific theories. Apparently Warren Ellis does, and so he wants to cram it down our throats if we're interested in reading a series about all of pop culture existing in one world with mystery archaeologists uncovering it all. And if you are interested in reading something about that, then you may not like the last issue of this series. In fact, you may not like this volume very much at all. Now, maybe I'm overreacting. It's very possible that there are people out there who really love this volume just as much as they love the other volumes of this series. But me, I think this is a considerable step down from the first two volumes and even quite a bit of a step down from volume 3. But overall, would I recommend reading this? If you really, really love the rest of the series, yes, just so that you can see how everything is wrapped up. But keep your expectations lowered because this is not going to be this grand, awesome finale that you are probably expecting if you've just started reading Planetary and you've read the first couple of volumes. So those are my thoughts on Volume 4. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow to talk about something else. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.